The forest is a place of peace, of tranquility, a perfect escape from the hustle and bustle of our daily lives. The rustle of leaves, the crackle of a campfire, the endless canopy of stars, ... It's idyllic. But sometimes, deep in the woods, far from the safety of civilization, that peace can be shattered. Sometimes the sounds you hear in the dead of night are just the wind or a curious woodland creature. Tonight, we're venturing into that darkness. We're going to share 3 true camping horror stories that will make you think twice before you pitch your next tent. So, gather around the fire, pull your blankets a little tighter, and listen closely. Just be sure you know what's making that noise outside your window. Our first story comes from a user named Trail Wanderer, who thought he was embarking on a simple solo hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains. He was an experienced outdoorsman, having spent countless weekends navigating trails and sleeping under the stars. This trip, however, was different. He'd picked a less traveled path, wanting to truly disconnect. The first day was perfect. He set up camp by a serene, glassy lake, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets. As dusk settled, he built a small fire and settled in. That's when he heard it, a whistle. It was a simple 2-note tune, like someone casually whistling a melody. It sounded distant, maybe from another camper across the lake. He didn't think much of it and soon drifted off to sleep. The next night, he was miles deeper into the wilderness, far from any marked trail or campsite. As darkness fell, he heard it again. The same 2-note whistle, but this time it was closer, much closer. An unease started to creep in. There was no reason for anyone to be out here. He called out, "Hello, is anyone there?" The whistling stopped. Silence, just the pounding of his own heart. He scanned the dense tree line with his flashlight, but saw nothing but shadows dancing. He tried to rationalize it. A strange bird, maybe? The wind through a hollow log? But the melody was too deliberate, too human. He barely slept that night, jumping at every snap of a twig. The third night was the worst. He had pushed himself hard, trying to put as much distance as possible between himself and the strange sound. He found a small clearing, exhausted, and decided to camp without a fire, hoping to remain hidden. As the moon rose, the whistling started again. This time it was coming from multiple directions, seemingly circling his campsite. One whistle would sound off to his left, and another would answer from his right. It was a coordinated, chilling chorus in the dark. Panic set in. This wasn't a bird. This wasn't the wind. Someone or something was out there, toying with him. He grabbed his largest camping knife and sat with his back against a thick tree, his flashlight beam cutting frantically through the darkness. The whistling continued for what felt like an eternity, sometimes close, sometimes far, a terrifying game of cat and mouse. He didn't dare make a sound. He just sat there, frozen, until the first light of dawn broke through the trees. The moment the sun was up, he packed his gear in a frenzy and practically ran the entire way back to his car, never once looking back. He never found out who or what was whistling in the woods, but he swears he'll never go solo camping again. The simple 2-note tune is forever burned into his memory. Our second story takes us to the vast, arid landscapes of the Australian outback. A young couple, let's call them Chloe and Ben, were on a road trip, exploring the raw beauty of the desert. One evening, they pulled off a remote dirt track to set up camp for the night. They were completely alone, with nothing but red earth and scrubland for miles in every direction. It was breathtakingly beautiful. They watched the sunset paint the sky in fiery colors, and then settled by their campfire, feeling like the only 2 people on Earth. Around midnight, as they were getting ready for sleep, they saw a pair of headlights approaching in the distance. This was unusual. They hadn't seen another vehicle for hours. The car, a battered old ute, pulled up about 100 meters away from their camp. A lone figure, a tall man, got out. He didn't approach them. He just stood by his vehicle, silhouetted against the night, and stared. Chloe and Ben felt a prickle of fear. They gave a tentative wave, but the man didn't respond. He just stood there, motionless, watching them. For 10 minutes, then 20, then a full half hour. The atmosphere, once peaceful, was now thick with tension. They tried to ignore him talking in low voices, but they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Ben suggested they pack up and leave, but their tent was already set up, and they weren't sure where the next safe spot would be. They decided to just get into their tent and hope he would eventually leave. They zipped themselves in, turning off their lanterns, plunging their small world into darkness. But they could still feel his presence out there. Every few minutes, Ben would cautiously peek out. The man was still there, still staring. Then the man started his car. The engine revved, and the headlights flashed on, illuminating their small tent like a stage. For a moment, they felt a wave of relief, thinking he was finally leaving. But he didn't drive away. Instead, he started driving in slow, deliberate circles around their campsite. The beams of the headlights swept across their tent again and again, trapping them in a dizzying loop of light and shadow. The sound of the crunching gravel and the low rumble of the engine was terrifying. They were trapped, isolated, with no one to call for help. This went on for what felt like hours. Just when they thought they couldn't take it anymore, the car stopped. The engine cut out. Silence. They held their breath, listening. After a minute that stretched into an eternity, they heard the car door slam, and the engine roared back to life. This time, the Utes sped off into the darkness, leaving them alone in the ringing silence. They didn't sleep a wink. At the first sign of dawn, they threw their gear into their car and drove away as fast as they could, leaving the haunting memory of the silent observer in the outback behind. For our final story, we journeyed to a dense national forest in the Pacific Northwest. This account comes from a group of 4 friends, Mark, Sarah, Jess, and Tom, on their annual camping trip. They were experienced hikers and chose a secluded spot deep within the park that they'd been to before. The first night was typical campfire stories, laughter, and enjoying the clear night sky. It was on the second night that things took a terrifying turn. They were all asleep in their respective tents when Mark was jolted awake by a sound. It was a scream. A blood-curdling, human scream of pure terror that echoed through the trees. It sounded like it came from somewhere deep in the forest, far away, but it was unmistakable. Everyone in the group woke up, their hearts pounding. They looked at each other, eyes wide with fear. "What was that?" Jess whispered. No one had an answer. They listened, but the forest was silent again. They tried to convince themselves it was an animal, a mountain lion perhaps. But the sound was too human, too filled with pain. Shaken, they eventually managed to drift back into a troubled sleep. But an hour later, it happened again. Another scream, just as terrifying, but this time it was closer, much closer. Panic began to set in. They quickly extinguished their fire, plunging their campsite into darkness, hoping to not draw attention. They huddled together, armed with bear spray and a small axe, straining their ears for any sound. That's when they heard the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, crunching on the leaves and twigs, slowly circling their camp. But it didn't sound like a person walking. The gait was wrong, too heavy and uneven. They could hear it moving just beyond the light of their headlamps. Tom, the bravest of the group, slowly shone his light into the trees. For a split second, the beam caught something. It was tall, covered in what looked like matted, dark fur, and it was moving between the trees. Before they could get a clear look, it was gone. The screaming had stopped, but the footsteps continued to circle them for the rest of the night. They were trapped, listening to this unknown thing patrol the edge of their camp. No one dared to speak. They just sat, backs pressed together, praying for sunrise. It was the longest night of their lives. When morning finally came, the footsteps were gone. They packed their camp with trembling hands, not even stopping for breakfast. As they were leaving, they found it. A set of massive, unidentifiable footprints pressed deep into the soft earth, circling the exact spot where their tents had been. They didn't just walk out of the woods. They ran. They never went back, and to this day they have no logical explanation for the screams, the footsteps, or the massive creature they briefly saw in the darkness. And that's all the time we have for today. The wilderness holds incredible beauty, but it also holds mysteries we may never understand. These stories are a chilling reminder to always stay aware, respect the wild, and maybe, just maybe, never ignore that feeling that you're being watched. What do you think happened in these stories? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have your own creepy camping story, I'd love to hear it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories and want more chilling content, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Stay safe out there.